Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coming Clean with the Dirty Dozen, where we put the finest explorers into your living room twice a week. My name is Aron Arngrimsson, and I'm going to be your host tonight. And before we introduce our special guest tonight, I want to take you behind the scenes and say hello to Jeff. Jeff, how are you, buddy?
Hey Aaron, how are you?
I'm good. Vic couldn't make it tonight, so it's just me and you.
Yeah.
How are things over in Chepstow? All good. I heard you're able to dive today.
Well, it only actually applies to England, which is about 100 meters that way. So I'm in Wales, where the lockdown hasn't changed yet, but hopefully within the next week or so.
Excellent. Well, either way, good news. You can run across the road and go scuba if you want over the weekend.
All right, catch you later.
See you later, brother. All right. Thanks for the crew, obviously, behind the scenes in this community project. The Dirty Dozen, who are we? For those of you that are tuning in, we're usually an expedition company, the Dirty Dozen Expeditions, and we find ourselves most of the time in Truck Lagoon, Bikini Atoll, Galapagos, Myanmar, Chernobyl, you name it. But obviously, during this COVID pandemic, everybody's behind four walls, and we figured, we're not on our episode number 10 now, that we'd reach out to some of our good friends, our special guests, our community, and bring up a conversation and invite you guys along for the ride. So for tonight, I have a good friend of mine from Shearwater, Mr. Gabriel Pineda. So if I give you a little bit of background about Shearwater and Gabriel, from its beginnings in 2004, Shearwater research has been fueled by the passion and vision of its CEO, Bruce Partridge. With a background in computer systems design, embedded programming, and advanced technical diving, Bruce brought a unique perspective to the world of dive computers. Shearwater Research designs and manufactures scuba diving computers and advanced diving electronics. It holds a leading position among companies and a reputation for some of the highest quality instruments on the market. Shearwater dive computers feature intuitive menus and interfaces that make them easy to use for divers at all development levels. Their computers are reliable, user-friendly, and easy to read underwater, and designed to improve the journey for divers everywhere. Today, Shearwater produces tens of thousands of dive computers per year in the Western Canada manufacturing facility, and in September 2019, Shearwater made the Growth 500 list for second consecutive year with a 5-year revenue growth of 350%. This makes Shearwater Research rank number 255 nationwide among the Canadian manufacturing sector. The relevance of this achievement is highlighted by the fact that it operates exclusively within an industry that experiences single-digit growth rates in the same time period where it grew at triple-digit rates. Tonight, we're joined by Gabriel, who works as Shearwater's Director in Sales and Marketing. Gabriel started diving in 1990 at the age of 14 and is currently certified as a TDI Advanced Trimix diver and a Revo CCR diver. Diving is an ingrained activity in his family, where his father started diving at the age of 14, along with Gabriel's grandfather. Originally from Honduras, Central America, Gabriel moved to British Columbia, Canada in 2003, where he became an avid cold water diver, enjoying the deep underwater walls and the shipwrecks of Vancouver Island and mainland BC. Gabriel bought his first Shearwater computer in 2011 and joined Shearwater in 2017. All right, so without any further ado, I think it's time to welcome our guest tonight. Gabriel, where are you, buddy? There are you. There you are.
Hi, I am in Langley, BC. It's one of the suburbs of Vancouver, just a few kilometers away from the ocean.
Excellent. Nice one, brother. So what is lockdown like where you are? When we were just discussing with Jeff, if he jumps across the road, he's literally allowed to dive as of today. What's happening where you are at the moment in terms of diving and lockdown?
In terms of diving, we were never actually forbidden to go diving. However, most of the public parks were closed. So you had to become a little bit resourceful to go into the water. I did dive. It's still, you are recommended to keep your distancing. One of the most popular parks for divers opened this last weekend, and there were a lot of divers over there. I was there, of course, and it was a beautiful day, no waves, really good ocean conditions. Really enjoyed that dive.
Man, I'm envious. How's work? How's business?
Well, business is different now. I used to be commuting every day or every business day to Richmond. It's another city in the Metro Vancouver area, and it took me about 40 minutes each way coming in. So now that I'm working mostly from home, I have more time to work out. My health, I guess, it's getting a little bit better. And it's impressive how you have to adapt in such a short amount of time to remote working protocols.
Yeah, I think we all have. I mean, I didn't used to be talking live on the internet 2 months ago, but here we are, and that's one of the things I'm doing to entertain myself in lockdown. What have you been doing, kind of at home with the family and the rest of it, to entertain yourself?
Oh, I've been doing all sorts of things. I was just last weekend before I went diving in this popular dive park. I cooked up a V wake for the Revo rebreather that fits in between the two canisters. I did some clay modeling and then one-time mold with plaster, poured in some molten lead, and it worked. It worked quite nicely.
And this is exactly what I'm talking about. I think I'm getting a 3D printer in a couple of days, and I'll be printing arrows and loop holders and God knows what. It's something I would never have time for if I wasn't stuck at home. But anyway, without any further ado, I think it's time to put you in the hot seat, Gabriel, and let you come clean with a dirty dozen. So give us a little bit of background about your diving career. I mean, what was your introduction to diving like?
Oh, I remember my dad used to keep tanks when I was 5 years old behind the TV, a little black and white TV. And my brother, he's 2 years younger than I, he would get behind the TV. All of a sudden, we hear this very loud hissing, and he's running out because he opened the valves of the tanks, and the tanks are draining. Those are some of my earliest memories. My brother was probably 3, I was probably 5, and it was tanks were a commonplace around our house.
Mm.
Uh, I started with my dad when I was 14, as you mentioned earlier. And back in those days, we were diving with J valves, and some of our rigs didn't even have SPGs. And the training was done by my dad and following guidelines from books, things like skills that you had to be able to swim 300 meters with an empty tank on your back and really prove yourself.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, before you're ready, you'd be begging, Dad, when can I get a tank and try this out and wait for it. You gotta build up on your skills. And I remember one time we were in Lake Yohoa in Honduras looking for an outboard motor, and that my uncle had dropped into the lake. And we were going over there, and I was on a snorkel free diving, and I would go all the way to harass my dad, pick up his depth gauge, and take a look at what depth I was actually going down. I was 45 feet at that time. So after doing that several times, and when my dad came up, he said, I think you're ready. I think you're ready to start using tanks. And so that weekend was my first dive with a tank. It was a fond memory.
And obviously, there's been quite a few years since then. But in the meantime, what kind of diving do you particularly enjoy? Caves, wrecks, back locally?
I dive most locally. I love diving here in BC. I've dove all over the place as well in Florida, Canary Islands, Maui, etc. But what I like about BC, the topography that we have here is very broken. We're living in, I believe, the southernmost fjord in the Pacific Ocean in
Hmm.
the American continent.
Yeah.
So this topography that you see above the water continues underwater, and you have these huge, deep walls that are just a shore dive. You step from the shore into the water. You go do your deep dive, and your deco is not boring. I've been in dives where you're doing deco for hours in blue water, and you get so bored. Every now and then, a little sardine comes by or a little remora comes by, and you get all excited because it's breaking the monotony of your deco. But in BC, you have all these environment changes that are progressing as you are ascending. So you can stumble upon a wolf-field den, or an octopus, or if it's a night dive, the seals will come in and use your light to hunt, because the fish get attracted to it, and the seals have learned to be predating on the fish as they are attracted to our lights. And sometimes you even see moms teaching their pups how to take advantage of diver lights in there. They're very focused on the hunt and don't mind us very much, but they're very active around us. If you just reach your hand a little bit, you can brush them or touch them when they're going after a fish in your vicinity.
So saying that you're an avid fan of local diving is kind of a segue, because I guess that's kind of what brought you to Shearwater. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was quite an interesting story. Back in 2011 was February 2011, when I first got my Shearwater. Before that, I had been doing tech diving with slate and bottom timer, and just the old-fashioned way when you were taught, and up to a point back in those days, uh, some people were even recommending against using dive computers for decompression diving, and there were several good points about them, about those recommendations. And but as technology kept on progressing, I started seeing a couple of options in the market that solved a lot of those problems. A lot of the arguments against that computers were being taken care of, and Shearwater was one of those. And I have to say, it was not my first option at the time. I
No,
was using vPlanner at the time, and there was another
weren't we all?
local computer. Yeah, everybody was using vPlanner, VPN plus two, right?
Yeah.
And there was another option that had a VPN algorithm in their computers, and at the time, Shearwater didn't have it. So I was leaning more towards that other option. And then I went and consulted with a local forum, divers mostly from Vancouver Island, and told them, "Hey guys, I'm having these options. What do you recommend?" And they strongly, I was surprised how strongly they were pushing me towards Shearwater versus my first choice. And I started giving all these arguments, and they were tearing them down. And okay, I guess I have to go to Shearwater. One of the problems, though, I was working in downtown Richmond, living in Langley. The only dealer at the time that Shearwater had was way out of my way. It was not near where I lived or worked, and I don't want to get into downtown Vancouver traffic and go there. So I sent an email to info@shearwater.com and asking them, look, I'm fine giving the dive shop my credit card over the phone, but I want to pick up my dive computer from your factory, which is just a bridge away from my office.
Hmm.
It's like a 10-minute drive. And I sent it off, and I was expecting, maybe if I got lucky, a response in about a week or something like that.
Sure,
It's
it's
my
the
first,
diving industry.
basically. And you're used to it, and you don't think much about it. But within a couple of minutes, I have a response, and it's all arranged. This is before lunchtime. I sent the email in the morning, and before lunchtime, everything's arranged. And yeah, the dive shop is waiting for that. I'm like, wow, I'm impressed. This
Mhm.
is fast. I wasn't really expecting to spend $1,000 this week, but okay, I
Hey, here
gotta
we go.
now. I gotta. So I paid, crossed the bridge, and our current director of finance gave me my Predator, And he said, well, Lynn isn't here. Lynn arranged for all this, and she's in here to deliver your computer because she is in Moscow at a trade show. So it got me thinking, wow. So I'm in Vancouver. I'm asking for all these things to my convenience because I don't want to drive. And some person in the other side of the world at some unholy hour is responding
Sure.
almost in real time to my emails to comply with my whims as a customer. I was impressed. I'm not used to this, and not only in the scuba industry, but in general, I'm not used to this kind of customer level of service. So that was impressive at the first time, and then I think by June, Shearwater asked if somebody could, of some of their users would be willing to do in beta testing for VPM. And so, yes, VPM is coming to Shearwater.
Yeah, I
So, of
remember that.
course, I raised my hand. I want to be I want to be a beta tester. So I got the beta firmware, and I remember I would cut tables from vPlanner and put them on the slate and do the dive just focused on the slate and the bottom timer, kind of ignoring what the predator is saying.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, go in, download the log, and then compare it and overlay it and see how closely it fit or not, and then write a little report, send it off to Shearwater. This is what I found, and so on. And at the same time, hey, I'm going to start asking for some things that I want to have in here. I remember back in the day, there was no setting for salinity.
Yes.
There was just one single EN salinity that was right in between salt and fresh. It was neither fresh, neither salt, the water density parameters.
Yeah. So for our condition, they were not ideal. For example, I was in the Red Sea.
Yeah. So I send it out, and Tyler Cohen, our current director of engineering, would reply, well, your decompression schedule is not affected because decompression calculations are done based on the pressure reported by the pressure sensor, not on a depth reading.
Exactly.
Depth is only a product of translating the pressure measurements into a certain unit, whether it's feet or meters. So you're fine from a decompression point of view, but it's kind of weird that you have your bottom timer, it never matches your predator. So I kind of tried to make my argument, and I ended up giving up. I thought, well, you win some, you lose some. I thought I had lost that argument, but what do you know, a couple of weeks after that, new firmware comes out and it's got salinity settings. I'm like, yeah,
Hmm.
I'm being listened as a customer.
Yeah, sure.
This is a impressive company, and it started planting a seed in my head. Maybe it'd be good to work at this company one of these days. Who knows what the future has waiting for you? So yeah, it's a nice relationship that I've had first as a customer and now as an employee with Shearwater. I really enjoy working here.
And that's probably one of the things that Shearwater is renowned for is their customer service. I can speak from personal experience, just from people I know when I had a dive center, a technical dive center, and the rest of it. But having said that, it kind of brings us to let's maybe tune it down to the beginnings of where they came from. So in 2004, Shearwater started out of Bruce Partridge's bedroom. So what was the first product that started this revolution?
Well, in the picture that you see over there, Bruce has a controller. It's a big, massive hunk of metal, and he's diving a Kiss Classic. So inside that box of metal, you have solenoids, you have batteries, you have the O2 sensor readers, and it displays it on a little screen. It doesn't have decompression information, but this is one of the first products where Bruce started it. Unlike other companies that see more business potential with more massive sub-segments of the scuba industry, recreational segments. Shearwater had its roots at the apex. If you put in a
Sure.
triangular shape as part of a model of what the scuba industry is, at the tip, the most sophisticated divers would be rebreather and technical divers, but that is not a massive amount of volume in there. It's actually quite a small segment. So regular business would look at that, and the more logical business plan would be, okay, let's start working from the bottom of the pyramid and up because more volume is in there. That was not the story of Shearwater. It's quite the contrary. So that being ingrained in the DNA gave Shearwater some unique perspectives and differentiators versus other participants in the industry.
Mm.
It's being Bruce being a tech diver and having the experienced in his own skin the pain points that divers experience uh, also played a big role in things. There's a video where Bruce is explaining that when you find yourself in Scapa flow with low visibility, high current, and with a hefty decompression obligation, that's not the time to try to figure out the menu for your computer. The
Quite,
answers better be
yeah,
there and better be intuitive and fast
yeah,
and
right.
reliable,
Yeah.
and they should be right and it should be an instrument that helps you instead of hindering you.
Sure.
So with those pain points in mind, that's what set off Bruce developing the first computers.
And I think you have a very good point there about the triangle, because a lot of the technical computers you say today started at the opposite end and have and the problems you described that we experience with some of these products derange from that exact problem. So that's a good point. Um, I wanted to ask a little bit about the testing that you guys were doing in the early age. I believe we have quite a funny video behind the scenes here. What's that? It's the Pursuit.
That is the pursuit, and that's not our video. That is actually Paul from Revo.
Oh, okay.
Paul, yeah, we don't treat them that harshly.
So tell us what's happening.
Yeah, so Paul in here is trying to make a Pursuit, a Shearwater Pursuit implode. Shearwater Pursuit was one of our earlier models. This is before we started making color screens. And it's you can see that the menu and the layout is very similar.
Hmm.
But what's happening in here, Paul is pushing it to beyond its limits and seeing what happens and reporting it. I believe Paul published this in YouTube. And so you can see now the faceplate being a little bit
Oh, yeah, it's getting darker.
darker because there's a contact point with the LED in there.
How deep is
And
that now?
eventually,
200?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's already it's deco stuff. 320 meters, 350 meters.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's
So yeah, that's a little bit abusive to the poor pursuit, but
but from the get-go, they've been getting rough treatment. Let's put it that way. Um, so when Shearwater entered the CCR market, there was some circuit board fixes with Megalodon and so on. What was the second rebreather Shearwater implemented their electronics into, and how did the Shearwater enter the rebreather market so aggressively like they did?
I believe the first one, as you correctly mentioned, we started working with Megalodon. But the second rebreather to be onboarded, if I'm not mistaken, is JJCCR,
Yeah.
and the third rebreather brand was Revo onboarded. Um, we with DiveCan, we with Megalodon. Eventually, Meg ISC did some changes that are slightly different from our version of DiveCan and did their ISC can, and until very recently, they that CAN bus system, the ISC can, was what was running their systems.
Hmm.
Now, with the introduction of the Tiburon rebreather, ISC is coming into using DiveCan protocols as well, and full Shearwater electronics with the Tiburon.
But how do you think Shearwater got so integrated into the rebreather community? There's almost no rebreather without them at this point.
Well, I think you got to go historically. Even today, the tech diving community is a small community, and it's a global community, and we're connected. We have conversations in the same forums, same social media spaces. Back then in the day when Bruce was founding Shearwater, the community was even smaller. And there was also all these home builders of rebreathers. Some of them went on to become main strong brands for the rebreather market, but they were consulting amongst each other. And Bruce was an integral part of that community. They were all in there discussing their projects and trying to see how to very much in the same way that we do today. You go into a Facebook group, and it's quite often that you see somebody saying, "Hey guys, what GF setting are you using and why?" Or what do you ask? You ask all these technically oriented questions, and that was something that Bruce had a lot of interaction and working together and making the relationships. We just were there at the right time and at the right places, and asking the right questions and giving the right answers as well, if the questions were asked for us.
I think that's a really good point because, like you said, customer feedback. You're very avid at listening to your customers, and it kind of reflects on your product line as it kind of continues. With the Predator, and then with the Petrol 1, Petrol 2. When we had the Perdix, now we have the Terric. So, like you said, from the triangle, you've been very aggressive on the technical market, and that's where your big success is. But now you can see you're moving into the recreational market. So can you tell us a little bit about how that transition came about and how it's going?
Actually, quite an interesting story, because having that expertise at the higher levels of the scuba industry gives you some advantages. And can mention, for instance, Richard Lundgren taking video footage for a National Geographic documentary, where in a Mexican cave, these dive explorers using rebreathers are looking for the bones of the first human being they can see in the American continent. And the climactic shot of the entire documentary has the diver picking up this cranium, and in his wrist there's a petrol controller. You cannot pay. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You cannot pay for that kind of product placement. But more importantly, it's not done as a product placement. It's because it's the tools that the real explorers, those at the vanguard of exploration, are using. It's the real thing. So divers notice those things. Divers, as they grow into their sport, they see, well, I've been hearing about the Dirty Dozen and reading about all these uh, uh, webinars and interviews that Aron has been doing, and I'll look him up in Facebook. And what is Aron using? He's using a Prism 2, and what kind of computer is he using, and so on. You start noticing those things, and that speaks a lot more volumes. Then there's also the rationale about how if it's good enough for that kind of exploration of those kind of rigorous conditions,
Yeah.
it'll be good enough for me. I want to have that kind of reliability in my diving kit as well. And then you start discovering other things, the easiness of the navigating of our menus. Like Bruce was saying, make a menu that's easy to understand while you're in the Scapa flow in high current. We can also apply that same philosophy in the recreational diver modes that we have in our computers, and make it easy to understand, open. Furthermore, the last but not the least important is that we are very intent on listening what our customers tell us. We enjoy talking with them, whether it's at the dive boat, on a shore dive, on the phone, on a trade show, and we love getting that feedback. We cannot promise to implement all the feedback, but we do listen to everything and we document it. We actively uh, take meetings and decision making paths that are based on that kind of feedback. So it's a relationship that we have been building, starting at the higher technical circles, and then percolating into the entry levels, and we enjoy it all. It's been a good business for us, and more than the business itself, the relationships, the hobby that we love. It's been good for us.
But I think, like you were saying, the one of the reasons, hopefully, that the Terek came out was because there was an urge for a new product in the recreational segment. So I'm curious about that transition. What kind of customers were asking you about this? Are these recreational divers that were interested in gradient factors, or how did that all go?
Well, there was a form factor. Most of our computers, in fact, all of our computers, with the exception of the Nerd, up to that time, were rectangular and fairly big. And we have noticed that our Asian diver customers, they have slightly different preferences. While in other parts of the world, the big screen and a significant piece of equipment on your wrist is okay. In certain segments, and particularly with ladies as well,
Mm,
it's a smaller form factor is highly sought after. Not just that, but also a form factor that's easy to travel with,
mm,
something that you can be having on your wrist all the time, that you can go to a wedding and not be out of place with that in your wrist. And if it's as
sure.
capable or more capable than the existing rectangular form factors that we have, we think it's a natural progression. So it's not necessarily that we were intent on targeting even more recreational diving segments or trying to put in technical diving protocols into recreational segments, but looking at the ergonomics and understanding what the customers wanted. Furthermore, with the Terek, we made an incursion into the free diving world.
Yeah,
Uh, our rectangular form factor computers don't have audible or haptic alarms, vibrational alarms.
sure.
For free divers, this is very important. And we will probably talk a little bit more further. But going back to the Terek, there was that, all those capabilities. And honestly, uh, we were not expecting this kind of response for the Terek. We were quite pleasantly surprised at the
It went
popularity.
huge.
It was huge. It was huge. I remember we launched it on May 28th, 2018, and
Yeah.
remember that we went left the office at 5 p.m. and overnight we had an internet outage. Our website came down, and it happened when the sun started rising in Asia and our website started getting all these hits. It brought our website down. We were not
Oh,
expecting that kind of volume, and so okay, I guess we gotta increase our bandwidth and put in more resources into our web assets because it was a significant response.
And I think it's fantastic that you broaden your product range because although like I can say for myself, I've tried to use the Teric in truck and bikini as a backup computer to my CCR, and although like today I actually use a Perdix and the Teric is maybe not right for me, it will be perfect for lots of other people. So like you say, the form factor I think is a huge part of it, and it just gives the technology access to a broader public, which is amazing. But I actually have quite a few people asking questions about this exact topic, so I'll bring a few up. The first question I'd like to bring up is from Vish. Sorry, I won't be able to pronounce this one. Vish Rashan. His question is: was this a reaction to the Garmin descent?
Not really. We it was not a reaction to the Garmin descent. We are making dive computers. Our creation cycles for a new product can go between 18 to 24 months or more. So we had to be working on the Teric well before we knew about the Garmin descent. It was not a reaction.
So here's another one from Mr. Meno. How are you doing, brother? The question is, can you maintain the high level of customer service with a growing recreational customer base? Also, those might be less hardcore divers and expect a different level of service as they have less emotional value or sympathy for shearwater, what exists in the tech diving community. What do you think?
Hey, Menno, good to see you, man. Yes, it's a challenge. It's a good challenge to have, and it's something that we work very hard at building ourselves and our infrastructure to maintain it and improve it every single day. We put a lot of resources into that. In fact, we have in our our mantra, we really, really care for our customers. That is part of our core values. It's our number one core value. I believe I posted it, a frame of our core values in one of the blog posts some time ago. But we live that, and we move mountains to live that. And our plans as we grow is to not let this one slide and be reduced.
I couldn't agree more, and I totally feel the question because as my business grew personally, it was a constant challenge because in the beginning you would answer emails at 4 a.m. in the morning, you would be all over it, and you would be so busy. But as business grows, you get new challenges, but we all stand up to them. But let's maybe move into the Shearwater algorithm a little bit. I bet a lot of people have been waiting for this part of the conversation. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, Shearwater only uses open source algorithms, VPM and Buellment with gradient factors. Open source algorithms give us a series of advantages. First of all, it's open for all divers to study them and understand them and be trained on them. So particularly with Buellment these days now more than VPM, it is very likely that a tech diver will be trained in Buellment. Not only that, the papers, the code behind it, the rationale that Eric Baker, the creator of gradient factor, conservative strategy, it's open and available for all to read and understand. So it's part of the community, and now it becomes a common, ubiquitous language where, as I was saying in my earlier example, a diver will come in from a different part of the world. Well, what gradient factor are you guys using? And he'll get the discussion going. So even though no dive computer or algorithm knows for a fact what's actually happening in your tissues, your real tissues, not theoreticals, your metabolic rates, and so on, this is a widely accepted and understood mathematical model, a representation of what we think would be modeling and would allow us to do safe ascent strategy from a dive. And using that, we can then apply numerical scales and communicate in a numerical basis as divers. And so, if I go on the Dirty Dozen expedition and you're leading the expedition, you ask me what's going to be my gradient factor. I can tell you, you understand what it is, and you know what kind of dive is coming down the way. So, no surprises.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
yeah,
It,
in comparison to other algorithms that might be proprietary or closed, you end up having a lot of surprises, and those are not welcome by divers.
no.
You have to plan all your aspects of your dive. You plan your dive and you dive your plan. That's
Sure.
what Hallwatt says, and it's just as true today. So you have to plan your gases. You have to plan your contingencies. And a surprise thrown in by your computer at an unlikely time, it's not welcome.
Not really.
No.
um, yeah, no, it's a funny you say that about the boat, because when I start a trip, the most common question I guess in the beginning is, so what gradient factor are you using? And I'm actually very reluctant to answer that question, because I don't believe that there's any one gradient factor that is God answers to all, because we're all completely different in terms of our physical attributes, our age, our physiology, and the rest of it. And I think I remember a particular expedition in Bikini where Richard Lundgren was on board, and what was it? He said there was something about the gradient factors, and he was at the exact same philosophy. It's not something you should dictate onto other people, and it seems to be very common in the technical diving community that people say, "Oh, this gradient factor, this is the only thing that works," and I actually kind of disagree on that point, but. Surface gradient factors. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's interesting that you're mentioning that because yes, it is something that it's very personal, but you can also now, with the tools that we're having, put that numerical scale to use in a different context and give us more flexibility. So if you as a dive master or a dive leader in a Dirty Dozen expedition, you tell your divers, look, we want to be here maximum dive time of 3 hours,
Mm-hmm.
and try to do a surface in GF of 70 or less.
Yeah,
You
sure.
can do less than 70, you can do 80, and your gradient factor is tuned in for you, but you can start using that. And how did surface GF came up to to it's an interesting story. So we have that slide in there. It says that once upon a time, one of our engineer, Tim Inglis, Tim was cold. He is a tech diver, and Tim was doing a dive in February. And in here, you see him holding up all the regulators that he would need for that particular dive. I think it was more than an hour long dive. On February 24, 2018, Tim took this picture, and you can see it looks cold, and it was cold.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's a nice, beautiful scenery in there, but it's cold. so, so he went down there and he's doing his decoy, and he still has X amount of decoy to do. And he's wondering, you know what? I want to go to the surface now. I want to go to that boat and warm up. But what would happen if I were to blow off my stops? What kind of surface GF would I have if I, at this time, with my current real time gas loading, what would happen if I go there in relation to the M value? The M value is the maximum overpressure gradient that your tissues would allow in under the Buhlmann algorithm in this particular case. So in the chart that you see in there, the deeper that you go, the more pressure you're going to have. So as you have spent some time at depth, your tissues have been absorbing all that partial pressure, so those pressures of all these inert gases and approaching ambient pressure. But as you depart the bottom and you start going towards the shallower parts, now you have an overpressure gradient where your tissues have more pressure than the ambient in itself, and that's necessary for you to be off gassing. But there's a point in time, or a point in pressure, not time, that you should not be exceeding. And this is what the algorithm tells you is the M value line, the maximum overpressure line. In gradient factor parlance, that would be equivalent to a 90. And what gradient factors does, it's quite simple. You see in there those percentual scales in between the ambient pressure and the M value line, that goes from 0 at ambient pressure to 100 at the M value line, both at depth and at the surface being 1 ATA, 1 absolute atmosphere. So you don't want to be playing unnecessary risks and trying to do your decompression schedule all the way to the max allowable by the algorithm. You want to pad it a little bit more. How do you pad it? What kind of strategy do you use to put in that extra safety margin? And in this particular case, a gradient factor line or ceiling line that goes from the 30 gradient factor of GF low, the one that determines your deep stops, all the way to the 80% at the surface. And that will become now your ceiling. You don't want to be exceeding that load. That M value you see in there, if you exceed it, does not necessarily automatically mean that you're going to be bent. There is a possibility that you might not be bent if you exceed that M value line, but you don't want to be playing in those odds. The odds are against you. The higher that you go above that, or closer to that M value line, the more and bigger bubbles that you're going to have. And conversely, the lower that you go closer to the ambient pressure, the less bubbles that you're going to have. But conversely, you have to spend more time doing deco to keep it in there. So you have to fine tune that sweet spot for you, and you can use gradient factors to do that. You can determine how deep you want your deep stops to be and how long you want your shallow stops to be. And with that in mind, let's say you start ascent somewhere over there where the blue arrow is, and you initiate your ascent towards the left side of that graph, that is the lower pressure side, until you hit that 30% line. And that is what gets dictated at your first stop. So you stop there, you off gas, and you off gas all the way until you have enough off gassing that will allow you to do another ascent in multiple of 3 meters or 10 feet that will still comply with that line. So if we go to the next slide, surface GF in this particular case, if you were to put it on your nerd, for instance, this would be a nerd saying on a Revo that has 4 O2 sensors. The nerd would be reading the 4th one, and the petrol would be reading the first 3 ones. So this nerd would be telling you that if you are at that point in time at a depth of 41 feet and at a time of 52 minutes into your dive, if you were to automatically appear at the surface, surface in GF would be of 168%. So that M value line is exceeded at the surface at the lower end of that graph, that corner, by 168%. It answers the question. If you were, the question that Tim was asking himself, if you were to blow off all your stops, how bad would it be? How badly would you get bent? The answer could be 168%. Is that answer? Then it makes you perk up, because sometimes you can start getting complacent and you say, hey, this deco dive is an easy one. There's been no issues whatsoever. I'm doing fine with my stops and my schedule. And then you look at your surface GF and it reads 300%. It perks you up. It's no time for relaxation. You still have to keep this under control. And it's a nice piece of information to have. One of the things that I like about surface GF, particularly in relation to the recreational diving community, and if you could move into the next slide, is that the recreational diving community is also looking at using this tool for recreational diving, diving within the no decompression limits. If you think about it, you use, and I'm making up, I don't know what gradient factor you use. It's keeping it secret is your prerogative.
Exactly.
But let's say you use the defaults 30-70, and you do a 100-meter dive in I don't know, Bikini Atoll. You come up, and you've said yourself. I remember listening to you discuss with Mark Powell how you would like to spend extra time after you clear your decompression schedule. So at the end of the day, you're ascending with a gradient factor of less than 70
Sure.
up to the surface. But a recreational diver that sets their computer on a low conservatism that could be as high as a GF high of 95, and this person is riding the NDL within the minute short of the NDL all the way to the
Mhm.
surface, just stops for 3 minutes at a surface safety stop, 15 feet, and then goes up. This person could potentially be ascending at the surface at a surfacing gradient factor of 92. So at that
Yeah,
point in
exactly.
time, once you're done with
Mhm.
your decompression, your deep dive to 100 meters versus a recreational diver that came up, you have a different gas loading and a different DCS risk factor. And it's a little bit uh, spurious to think that recreational diver in most or all aspects is less risky.
Mhm.
Well, there are other risks for technical diving, of course. I'm not denying them, but your your decompression risk may not necessarily be lower.
Absolutely.
And look at the numbers.
Yeah.
So it's something that I was very pleased to see being discussed in a forum from a recreational point of view. And if
Absolutely.
you advance to the next slides,
Mhm.
they're saying discussing different strategies and saying, hey, these are my dive logs, and these are the surfacing gradient factors that I've been having,
Yeah, sure.
and discussing in the community. And in that final one, the person writing it is saying, hey, I think, and let me open it up, surface GF capping to me makes a lot more sense than
Mhm.
worrying about your NDL getting low for any given gradient factor.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's I feel very motivated when I see our tools being put in this use to further safety and understanding and knowledge of the overall concepts
Mm,
of decompression diving. Granted, we are not reading your tissues. These are theoretical tissues. No
of course.
computer does that currently, but we're talking about a ubiquitous numerical scale that represents risk, and we're
Yes.
communicating in that manner.
Yes. And given that we are used to using something like NDL, used to using gradient factors and the rest of it, but you have to have a certain amount of experience to understand either one. To have that new option has been very helpful for a lot of people, I believe.
It is, and it also helps you in case of difficult decisions. Sometimes you have to blow off a stop. It's better to be bent than drowned,
Absolutely.
and the the safer choice might be to blow off a stop.
Sure.
And then if you need to get to the surface in a hurry,
Yeah.
a surface GF number will be able to tell you more information, easy to understand information. Who
Yeah.
doesn't understand a scale of 0 to 100? And yes, we are talking about 16 different tissues, but you only have to worry about the leading tissue. Let the computer worry about the other 15, and if or when they become a leading tissue, the computer will automatically be reflecting that. But the information in that percentual scale is right there. You can put it on your home screen so that
Mm.
it's you don't have to even press a button and have it right at the tips. Other nice tools that we have for real-time decompression management, and sorry, can you go back one slide? It's GF99. Also, again, picking on your conversation with Mark Powell, you were you were mentioning that you have a second computer, a secondary
Mm-hmm.
computer set on 9090, and that is interesting because at 9090 you can have your get out of Dodge quick card, but you can also follow up on GF99, and GF99 will be giving you real-time value of what's your
Sure.
current loading tissue for that leading tissue at that point in time in the same scale that we're talking about. So if you keep it at the lower numbers, the less stress that you're going to have. If you see your GF99 approaching 100, you're doing something wrong. You're getting, yeah, something is at risk. Yeah. Other would be another one would be the ceiling. If you follow the ceiling, uh, you can get an idea of numerically where that line, remember the red dotted line, is at the time, instead of just relying on the multiples of 10 feet or 3 meters.
Mm.
So in the example that we were looking before to highlight surface gradient factors, excuse me, the ceiling was at 33 feet. Your stop was at 40 feet, but you were not cleared yet to go all the way to 30. So you could potentially, theoretically, move on to 33 without breaking your ceiling. You would be reported as a missed stop. It would get you out of the water a little bit quicker, and it's a different risk because we're not trained in that kind of decompression protocol, and we don't have data that tells you how much riskier that kind of decompression protocol would be, but it's a useful piece of information to have. The other one that we have on that slide is surface GF that we talked about. And finally, the last two are +5 and at +5 and delta +5. I like these
Yeah,
because
me too.
they tell you how quickly you're off gassing. It's not just about if I stay at this depth at 5 minutes for 5 more minutes, how long will my total decompression be or time to surface be? But it's also telling me, okay, you are off gassing. If it's a negative number, I'll be off gassing, and the bigger that negative number is, the faster that I'll be off gassing.
Mm-hmm.
So if I find something really interesting on that wall as I'm decompressing, I found an octopus den and I'm trying to take some footage. I can quickly glance: am I off gassing or on gassing? Is this going to help me? Can I afford it with my current gas plans and so on? Can I afford to stay 5 extra minutes? So all those tools are now available to you to manage on a real-time basis your decompression risk. It makes your diving so much more enjoyable versus doing the slate and bottom timer as I used to do it a long time
Yeah,
ago.
me too. So yeah, and that's all part of the real-time revolution, right? So is being in lockdown. Well, not now. It's starting to ease down. But have you had time while you've been indoors to get involved in any cool projects that you're allowed to share with us?
Oh, we always have cool projects going on. We have an engineering heavy company and we have to keep them busy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we have a lot of divers on staff. Most of the divers are either with sales and marketing or with the engineering group, and we go out together diving all the time. So it's I cannot be disclosing any one of the projects, but we have several coming.
So something to look forward to for the guys out there.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm just scrolling through the comment section and there's just so many people saying hello to you and thank you so much for your fantastic customer service. That's all I keep hearing the whole way down. Just trying to scroll up here. So a lot of thanks from a lot of people and myself for coming tonight. I think we're out of time. 59 minutes. That's it.
Yeah.
So Gabriel, thanks so much for coming tonight. It was a pleasure having you on board and chatting about this important topic. I hope you had fun.
I did probably spoke too much, but hopefully we're still doing it on time.
Yeah, no, we're all good on time. It's actually completely perfect. So without any further ado, I'll let you get on with your working day. So thanks so much for coming, Gabriel, and I'll see you hopefully soon.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. All right, everyone. That was what is it now? The 10th installation of Coming Clean with the Dirt Dozen. Thank you so much for obviously tuning in. And should you have missed any of tonight's episode, you can obviously check it out on our YouTube channel and on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, all these platforms. Remember to click the subscribe button and all this stuff that YouTubers say, right? It's time for our season finale. So our last episode actually is on Monday. And that's where we're going to be coming clean, or Kevin Gurr, should I say, is coming clean with us on Monday, May 25th at 7 p.m. GMT. And we're going to be talking about innovation from the bottom up, one of the heavyweights of our industry for sure. Really looking forward to this one. So without any further ado, I'm your host, Aron Arngrimsson. Stay safe in these little bit less wilder times. Take care of yourself and each other. And if you feel lonely, we're here to chat dirty. See you later, guys.